Well, Edward, thank you so much for joining us on Fully Scored. It's great to have a new face on the podcast and a new voice as well. Are you keeping well?
Very well, thank you, Matthew. Yes, doing well over here in Pendle. That's the Eastern Pennsylvania and Delaware division over here in USA East. Doing very well, thank you.
And you've been the divisional music director there for just about a year now, is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. Started just after Thanksgiving. Really enjoying this time here. It's a great division filled with a lot of history, a lot of people who are really excited for music and the arts to continue to develop and grow here. So it's been a great time.
Great, that's really wonderful to hear. So today we're going to be looking at Procession to Covenant, and you've asked to look at this piece. So I guess my first question would be, why did you want to choose Procession to Covenant? Does it have a special meaning for you?
Absolutely. This is one of those pieces which has stuck with me and stayed with me in many different years and formats. I think the first time I played this would have been with Boscombe Band. I would have been a young teenager in the band under Howard Evans. But over the years, I've been very fortunate to play this piece, and I think I've actually ended up playing all three trombone parts, not at the same time, but separately over the years. I was in the Southern Youth Band when we did a tour with for the Rose Bowl Parade, and I remember playing it in the great Crystal Cathedral over in California, which was very special. With Birmingham Citadel Band, we did this for a tour of Canada in Easter 2011. And over the years, I've been fortunate to have got to lead it a few times. I've done it with a couple of summer schools. A highlight for me was doing it at Star Lake in 2018, I believe it was, with Appalachian Band. That's the third band here at Star Lake. And in all honesty, it's probably slightly above their level, but this was an amazing piece to get to look at with them. There's so much story, there's so much drama, and there's so much meaning to uncover here. So for me, this is one of the greats of our recent history, and I think is a piece which will continue to stand the test of time.
Fantastic, and I look forward to unpacking that with you. So should we start by talking a little bit about the history of the piece, when it was written, what it was written for? Are you able to elaborate on that?
Absolutely. So, written by our dear friend William Himes, Order of the Founder, as it says in the score notes for this one. This was recently published around the time that Bill received his Order of the Founder for his great work in the Central Territory. It's quite rare for us in the Salvation Army to have a piece of music and know exactly when it was written, what day, when it was first performed. But here we are very fortunate because this was written specifically for the 3rd of January, 1998. Now, that might just be any old day to most of us, but for Bill, that was his wedding day. This was his wedding to the beautiful Linda. That was their marriage. And so this piece was written specifically for the procession of his bride to come down with. It's quite unusual for us to have that much specificity for music, whether in the Salvation Army or outside of the army as well. So to know exactly when and why a piece was written is always quite useful, I think.
Fantastic, absolutely. We can't get much more precise than that, unless you're willing to give a time that it was first performed.
Oh, I'm sure it was just before the wedding, whatever time that was.
Good answer, indeed. So, shall we delve into the score and look through some of the music then as we go through? So the piece starts with quite a foreboding pedal in the basses and on the timps, and where does the music take us in this introduction?
Sure. Well, we look right here at the beginning, and the trombones, again, speaking as a professional second trombone player, that was the height of my performance, really. Here, we're looking at the beginning, we have these open fifths from the trombones. This, for me, is our procession theme, and it starts right here. Let's call this, anytime we see this crotchet, minim crotchet, let's call this a procession theme. It's very broad. We're not quite sure whether we're major or minor yet. Right now, it's just an open possibility. It could be anything. And in this moment, for me, this is that initial feeling of the groom waiting for his bride. It is anticipation, it is excitement. We don't quite know what's going to happen yet. We don't know what the bride looks like. We don't know what the dress looks like. We don't know how the bridesmaids are coming down, all of that good stuff. So this is anticipation right from the very first bars. And for me, this is such an exciting opening. When we get to measure 3, this new melody comes in. And for me, I'm going to call this our covenant motif. Looking here, one of the beautiful things with any of Bill's scores is it is so clean. Not a single note is wasted. And for me, Procession is one of the ultimate examples of that. You look throughout this score and everything is so clear who is doing what, who is playing what role. It is very rare in a Haydn score that will see more than 2 or 3 ideas at once. So here we have this solemn procession theme underneath, which almost feels like a heartbeat. And then over the top of this, we have this new covenant motif. For me, it's covenant because the way that any time I've taught this, I go, this is my covenant, this is my covenant. So anytime we see that rhythm, covenant, covenant happens over and over again. Everything here is piano, everything here is in anticipation, it's excited whispering, it's excited, who knows when she's coming, she could be here any moment. But we look at this melody and we have the solo and the first horn moving in this beautiful arching way, up and then down, up and then down. It starts with a fourth, then up to a fifth, then up to a sixth. Each time, just slightly more excitement, slightly more. I can't wait to see what she looks like. Meanwhile, the lower half, the second horn, which is doubled with a first baritone, which has a lovely rich quality, quite French horn-like, is moving in the exact opposite direction. This idea of contrary motion is something which is very classical, very loved and wanted in our music, but it really gives this great feel of moving away and coming together again. The whole piece is very, very romantic, both from the storytelling, but also from a classical romantic era. This is very Wagner-esque, and I think it would be remiss for us not mention another great processional music. Of course, there's Elsa's Procession to the Cathedral, which actually our friend Bill Himes did the transcription of. This is from the opera Lohengrin. An amazing piece of music, but I think it's very clear that Bill has taken some inspiration, perhaps, from Wagner. There's a great saying, supposedly it was Stravinsky, it's that good composers borrow, great composers steal. And I think that's a great one. And if it wasn't Stravinsky, then it was me. I came up with that one instead. All of this is in G. We're looking at our B-flat instruments before we get a transition into 19. This is, if we're feeling particularly fancy and musically inclined, we have a chromatic mediant modulation. Try saying that 4 times twice. Here we go. We go from G to E flat, going down a submediant, G to E, but going to E flat instead. And there's a beautiful way he does that. If we look at the melody that the horns have, let's talk flugel. F, A, C, C, B, G, and this G should have been the home. That should have rooted us back into G major. That's our root of G. Okay, the tonic of G. But instead, as we transition into E flat, the G becomes the third, and it means that we have this great sense of motion and movement without it needing to be a cheesy key change, upper tone or upper semitone, any of that sort of stuff. The G just acts as our pivot note here, and it leads us into E flat in a second. Basses all the way through this have been enjoying this very steady progression. They've been playing just a pedal up to this point, and now at 11 they're starting to play more than one note. This, for me, again, we're all talking anticipation. This is a piece which is a gradual crescendo over the course of between 6 and 8 minutes, depending on how fast you want to play this. But that takes us into our new section at 19.
So, as you said, we get to number 19, measure 19 here, and things change again a little bit. The melody stays the same, but what happens in the accompaniment that changes the feel of the music here?
So far, there's not been much rest in our bass line. If we look at it, it's either been a whole pedal note from the basses, or it's been a crotchet, minim, crotchet. It's been constant all the way through. At 19, we introduce a beautiful thing, which is silence. We get to introduce a quaver rest, an eighth rest there. So it means that there's just this moment of pause, this moment of breath between each of these little statements of a bass line. Careful here for our conductors, know that 19, our E-flat basses are playing the fifth. They are not playing the root. So it's a really rich sound down in the bass here. So we had it at the beginning from the trombones. Here at 19, we still have this open fifth sound. So just be careful there that our E-flat basses aren't too powerful over the top of our B-flats there. But looking at all of the basses there and the timpani, just gives a little bit of motion there. Like we say, we've had this change of key. We have a change of texture as well. We now are up in our solo cornets, have our melody. Everything is still piano. Here at 19, we notice that the baritones are playing our longer notes. They're playing the semibreves, the whole notes, all the way through this one. And our euphonium has got this lovely undulating quaver motion. If you look at it carefully, you'll notice that the euphoniums are actually playing exactly the same notes as the baritones, but it's just undulating between the two. So this gives this feeling of the harmony is constant throughout, because we have it from the baritones, but this sense of motion is coming from the euphoniums, which is beautiful. Again, there's this moment of silence at the beginning of each one. And for me, that's again that breath of anticipation. Da dee da dee da da da. That moment of breath does a couple of things. It makes it easier for the euphonium player or players to play, and it gives that sense of anticipation. And something is happening here, and we're looking forward to this. Notice that there's no writ this time. So far, at the end of each of the phrases, there's been a little writ, a little pullback of tempo, a little cheating of time. But here we're going to continue moving as we go through this section. The other thing just to notice here, which I think is interesting, going back into the transition, the basses have this great, they go from playing Gs to F naturals to E flats. If we look here, the baritone then has this 1920 bar 22. They go from G, F, E flat. That could mean nothing, but it's actually going our 3-2-1, our hot cross buns motif there at the end there. We won't call that the hot cross buns motif, but maybe there's some significance to that, which we'll find out a little bit later. As we lead into our next section at 27, the cornets are moving in octaves. It's a stark sound, and it's got lots of power to it, but again, it's almost empty. The parallels there, they're moving together, meaning moving in the same direction, same spacing, same notes. There's just nothing in the middle. There's a flugel that tries to creep into the middle. If you look at the flugel there, it plays the same D, E, F to start with, but then jumps up to a C and then falls down. This sense of falling down and rising up happens throughout this piece. So here we look at the higher half are all falling down, and the lower half are raising up. You see that first trombone and the first baritone, they're raising up into the next section, whilst the horns are falling down into the next section. Which brings us all the way to our beautiful 27. 27, calore. What does this mean is the classic question you ask your students. I had somebody say, oh, it means color, which isn't quite correct. Calore here means warmth. But this idea of color, I actually think is a lovely introduction here. That's another way for us to think about it. Again, the ideas here are very clear. Our cornet family all moving together. There's no confusion about who should be doing what, who's moving where. They all have this covenant theme. In the middle here, we have the horns, who have a rare quintuplet figure. It's like a triplet, but with 5 of them instead. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1. 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1. For me, we're thinking about this imagery of the wedding party. It's got to be the flower girls. And this is a sweet little moment. 1, 2, 3, ya da 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 da. It's so sweet. Look at them. They're in their little dresses. They're giving the flowers out. I'm not sure what the horn players who are listening to this are going to think about me calling them the flower girls. But for me, that's a lovely little moment there, which is, again, perhaps borrowed, if not stolen, from Wagner. So we have our covenant theme in the top half. In the middle, we have the flower girls. And then below that here, we have, which I would call the groomsmen. So we have the rest of the wedding party are coming here. We have the baritones and euphonium moving together. answered by the trombones. Moving in very similar patterns here, moving with a fourth and then a third and a third. It's very triadic. It's hitting those main features of the chord. But this constant conversation between the two, for me, is such a beautiful moment. It's almost like here's the groom's side, here's the bride's side, and they're having this conversation together. Again, this section here is only mezzo forte. We're only at this moderately strong section. We're not at the end. We still have a long way to go. The bride probably hasn't even entered the room yet. It's simple. We're analyzing this perhaps far too much, but you can see here we have a covenant theme. We have our flower girl motif in the middle, which just adds motion. And then underneath this constant eighth note, quaver note, motion between the lower half there. It has this beautiful sense of motion and moving. It's like we're going somewhere. And guess what? We are.
Is there really such a thing as overanalyzing? Who knows? So, bar 34, we have the first entrance of the tune St. Margaret. Before we talk about how the tune's used, could you tell us a little bit about the tune itself, please?
So we get to the tune St. Margaret, which we associate with the words, "O love that will not let me go." Now, this is written by a Scotsman, George Matheson. This is a quote from Matheson himself. "I'm quite sure that this whole work was completed in 5 minutes, and I'm equally sure that it never received at my hands any retouching or correction. I have no natural gift of rhythm. All the other verses I have ever written are manufactured articles, but this came like a dayspring from on high." And the words are so descriptive. We have our first verse. "O love that will not let me go, I rest my weary soul in thee. I give thee back the life I owe, that inline ocean depths its flow may richer, fuller be." Now that's all well and good, but there's actually more to the story, which makes this piece even more poignant, even more heartbreaking, really. Matheson, actually, as a young man, as a teenager, he started to go blind. By the time he was out of his 20s, he was almost completely blind. He had actually been engaged to a lady, and as his sickness, his illness was taking place, she said to him, as much as I love you, I cannot stay with you. She couldn't be married to a blind man, and so she left him and broke off the engagement. He ended up going completely blind over the years, but spent his time in ministry, and it was his sister who would look after him for the rest of his life. Now that's a beautiful sadness there, and actually then when we look at our words which he writes, and particularly later on, the words which he writes are so descriptive and emotive, and to know that this is written by someone who is completely blind at the time and is maybe remembering these sights, remembering these colors, remembering the rainbow, which we'll see in a moment, really brings to it an extra level of poignancy. The words he wrote were written the evening before his sister's marriage. So perhaps in that moment of excitement for his sister, perhaps some solitude and weariness for himself, that's where these words came from.
Thank you for sharing that information. Really fascinating to hear there. Some of the things that you wouldn't know just playing this music through or just looking at the score itself. So how is that tune, St. Margaret, used at measure 34?
So measure 34, we actually have an interruption of the covenant theme. If you notice that the chords haven't quite finished saying that this is my covenant, this is my covenant, this is my covenant, and notice that the horns have come in and said, there's something actually here which I think is more important than you just having a promise to yourself. Let me tell you why this covenant is important. So they interrupt the end of that phrase. The horns take over our melody here at 34. And again, we're looking at the first verse, at least for me and for my money. "O love that will not let me go, I rest my weary soul in thee. I give thee back the life I owe, that inline ocean depths its flow may richer, fuller be." There's a little extra tension there. In bar 37, that F, E, D flat, C, that D flat, this accidental leaning as it falls down, this little sense of like, oh, it is a weary soul as it falls down there. but I think it's worth mentioning, again, as a second trombone specialist right here, we have a second trombone solo, Matthew. It's a beautiful thing. Notice at bar 35, we have this little moment, this little new motif. It almost feels like it comes out of nowhere. This B natural, which doesn't belong at all, to a C, to a G, and then to an F. Ba-da-ya-dum, something like that, at least. And it comes out of nowhere, and for me, this becomes a I love you motif. It's like, yes, I love you. This little moment here. And I think that might come into play a little bit later. Look a couple bars later, 39, and the trombones have listened to this, and it's like, whoa, if the second trombone got a solo, it's my turn too. The bass trombone gets to do it first, which is then responded by the first trombone and the first baritone. Oh, yes, I do. This idea, this fifth, every time is happening. For me, this little motion, this up a 5 and then down is, again, let's call this an I love you motif, which might come back a little bit later.
It's not often that a second trombone gets described as a beautiful thing, so maybe that's why the next section it's all rest for them just to take that in. Perhaps that was the thought
Absolutely.
process. So that takes us to measure 43, Poco Pio Mosso, and the mood of the music transitions and changes a bit here.
Absolutely. Poco Pio Mosso, a little more movement, just a little. And here we have an entrance of the snare drum. Please turn your snares off, all percussionists. This moment here, the snare drum is playing the same rhythm as our E-flat bass, the same rhythm as our baritones. This idea for me is absolutely our heartbeat. This might have been what we would have called our procession motif at the beginning, but here has definitely become a heartbeat. Yum bum 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 bum. It's so beautifully emotive. It's this, it has to be for me this excitement of something is happening. I can't wait to see my bride. I can't wait to finally be united together here at the altar. So maybe this procession theme has actually been a heartbeat the whole time, and it is there to stay. At 43, our solo cornet comes in with this beautiful new pleading love song. Again, we have this this falling down of the motif, yada 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 da yada deem, falling down, as opposed to the rising fourths and fifths which we've had so far. And we then have this beautiful sequence. Again, this is a great piece for studying as a composer, great piece for teaching some of our grade 5 theory terms. It's a sequence, because we then look 2 bars later, and the first cornet plays almost exactly the same melody that was 2 bars before in the solo cornet, but they play the same note. But this time the solo cornet has gone up by a third. Again, it just gives us more richness. It's like here, I had this idea on my own, but what if I had this idea with somebody else? What if I was combined with someone else? And it gives this beautiful richness of sound and quality. The horns then take over this anguishing theme, this romantic song that we have here. But notice that there are no pesky accidentals anymore. We've got rid of those. We're back in our key and we're in harmony. So maybe we have an answer here. Maybe we are united together. Maybe this will be a happy story ever after. But then just before we get to tempo primo, we have one more rit, one more slow down for a moment, and we have this F F F F A flat G, F. And for me, this is a real question mark. It's like, will you really say I do? Do you really love me? I think you can actually associate those words if you want to there as this momentary pause before we see what's going to happen next. This anguishing love thing is happening, and it's here. I'm talking to you, you're talking to me, and the two parts are uniting, and this is beautiful. And here's a little moment of pause, a moment of question of, will you really say I do? Going back to our original tempo here, look at the different ideas that are happening. But unfortunately, they're not aligned together. They're all slightly at odds with each other. It's almost like we're having this conversation and we haven't quite agreed to make this covenant happen. Our solo cornets, they're playing the covenant theme, and they play it again, but this time they've gone up by quite a nasty interval. We've gone from playing it in B flat, now they're up on an F sharp. It's quite, it's not dissonant, but it is quite a questioning of what we've had. Meanwhile, look at our euphonium. Our euphonium at tempo primo is playing the groomsman motif, and that's rising up again. And then at the same time, that first quote of "Oh love that will not let me go" is coming from our flugel, our second cornet, and our first trombone there. Here in this moment, the music is not quite aligning. It's all there, all of the components of this covenant, all of these ideas of a covenant being a dedicated commitment to something. Here, in this context, we're talking about a marriage. But here, we still have this questioning. And look at the line, "Oh, love that will not let me go." We would expect it to end on an F, but instead it goes up to an F sharp. It's a question, like, are we really sure? Is there hope here? Do we know what's going to happen? And we rise all the way up to our first forte of the piece. It's been 53 bars, and this is the first time that we're allowed to play strong. Not loud, strong at 53. This transition happens and we go back from being in the key of E flat, we go back to G, which is where we started. But again, the idea is that we've gone from somewhere and we're raising back, and we're back at this place of anticipation, of unity, of wanting this to happen between the two original parties. And that's, I think, what happens as we transition into 54.
So can you talk us through this section here then at 54, please?
Absolutely. So we've just had this modulation, again, going from E flat up to G. It's an unexpected modulation, this chromatic mediant modulation. But here at 54, we have espressivo. That doesn't mean have a coffee. That means expressively. Let's look at a couple of elements here. We can see that our trombones have taken over the heartbeat motif. Yum, bum, 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 bum. But rather than there being a rest, now there's this quarter note in between. It's like the heartbeat is slightly stretching. It's like we want a little bit more time to understand this, a little bit more time to comprehend what's happening here. But at 54, we have this love song starting in the solo cornet, which is then answered by the solo horn. This, for me, is the bride and the groom. They are talking to each other. It's almost like we're transported back in time. This is before all the ceremony, all the people are waiting in the church. This is beforehand. The bride and the groom were just able to speak with each other one more time before they see the dresses, before they see all the outfits. Like, hey, let's just talk about this, just you and me. I really love you. I really love you too. Then we get to bar 58, and there's not disagreement, but there is this contrariness between the two lovebirds here. Rather than moving in perfect unison together, now they have this little back and forth. Notice that the solo horn has a moment to breathe, and notice that Bill has put in the breath marks for us. He wants this to be as clear as possible. And as we move through this next section, we have this little conversation between the two. At bar 58, we have our first 16th notes of the whole piece. And who has it? It's the B flat and E flat bass. This is not a piece to be rushed. You are not rushing anyone to get down the aisle, and if your bride is in her big dress, she does not want anybody to tell her to hurry up, certainly not the B flat basses. But here is our first inference of anything like 16 notes, and they're in the bass line there, which is really interesting. I wonder if that might come back in a little moment. Look at bar 59. I love you too. That motif has come back in the solo horn. That rising fifth, ya-dee-da-da, the rising fifth there before it falls down. I love you too has come back. And then bar 60. Bar 60 for me is such a beautiful bar, and it is so easy to skip over. The heartbeat is happening in the trombones. We know that's happening. We know the basses are doing their bass thing. But a third part has entered the conversation between the two lovebirds, right? We have the solo cornet, we have the solo horn, they're having their conversation, it's lovely. But the euphonium enters in as well here. Now for me, this idea of a covenant between two people is not truly between two, it's between three. The idea of a marriage, a holy marriage, is between the two partners and God. And if we look at what is the euphonium playing here, it looks like it's just a nice little phrase. But if you look at it carefully, compare the solo cornet to the euphonium line here. They are moving in exact mirror, taking all those notes and completely inverting it, flipping it on its head. It's like you have a mirror and you flip it over. It's like that has been there the whole time and we weren't aware of it. It's like the steps of our path had been laid out for us. It's like the procession to covenant was always designed, and it's right here. And it's such an easy moment for us to flip over and ignore. But this for me here is this perfect inversion is a reflection of love, is a reflection of what this covenant might be. teneramente, tenderly. The heartbeat is still there, but again, it's like time has slowed down. It's like we're in this moment of stillness, the moment of like holy stillness. The piece is probably getting towards the end. We're hoping that the bride is going to make it down the aisle eventually. Like, we all have a reception to get to. But here, teneramente is pianissimo. It's the first pianissimo. It's the quietest moment of the piece. And it's happened after this beautiful little holy moment. Looking at the solo cornet line, we have this D to E flat, then we have an E flat down to a D. It's a half step. It's a semitone. It's as close of a suspension as you can get. And it's such a... Again, I hate to say it, but it's romantic. It's romantic. You can imagine Wagner violins playing something like it, and it leads us gradually, slowly, with a molto rit, a very sudden, very severe slowing down to take us into 65. And 65 is truly magical. And here we have three of our ideas, three of our motifs return to us. We're restricting ourselves down to the absolute bare bones. We have one player on soprano cornet, probably, hopefully. We have one player on the first cornet, both muted. It's the covenant theme that we had at the beginning. Again, this idea of this is my covenant over and over again. But it's all an octave higher than it was at the beginning. It's been raised up and it is muted, so it has not just a quieter dynamic, but a different sound, a different tonality to it with that muting, all at piano. Looking at our trombones, they're playing our procession or our slowed down heartbeat. Depends what we want to call it now. Is this procession theme? Is this a heartbeat? But again, if we compare this to the beginning, everything is an octave higher. But there is something else which has been here all along, which we just didn't know. We were missing this tune, St. Margaret. This has always been here, and it's played by one player, by the flugel. And the words here, which for me I associate with the third verse, "O joy that seekest me through pain, I cannot close my heart to thee. I trace the rainbow through the rain, and feel the promise is not vain, that morn shall tearless be." Now, if you know Bill, and you know some of his story, you'll know that he has had heartbreak in his life. There have been some moments of real sadness. It's not truly my place to share some of that in a setting like this. But this, for me, is a lovely reflection of what pain he may have had is now melting away. This is a new start. This is a new beginning. This is a new partnership. This is a new covenant that he is creating with his wife. And it's a new beginning, which is going to be beautiful. And any sadness that there was, he can wash away. When we go back and we think about our George Matheson, and that line, "I trace the rainbow through the rain," is so beautiful. But then when you realize that this man was blind, it has a whole other aspect to it. "I trace the rainbow through the rain and feel the promise is not vain, that morn, that the morning, that the next day, that the new beginning shall tearless be." And as we come to the end of the phrase, we keep hearing covenant. It starts in the soprano cornet, that's E down to an A, then it goes to the first cornet, D to G, then G to D. It's working its way down. We then flip over the page carefully and quietly, and when we flip over the page here, we notice that it's then in the euphoniums, but there's a moment of harmony there. There's a moment where they're not playing just this open fifth. There's actually the third in there as well, which has this lovely little sense of warm, like actually, yes, covenant with two people here is going to be better than with one. This then passes down to the bass trombone and the E-flat bass, which then passes down to the B-flat bass and the timpani, which leads us to 78. Again, the wedding party might have made it all the way down the aisle at this point. They're hopefully waiting at the altar. Maybe Bill or whoever this fictitious groom is that we're thinking of is waiting there. And the music has completely died away. This is not what we're expecting. If we think back to some of the classic wedding processionals, something like Here Comes the Bride, some of the Mendelssohn stuff, or even if you think about Pachelbel's Canon in D, right? The classic ones. The music just builds, it keeps getting bigger and bigger and louder and louder. That's not what happens here. We've died away. We've come away almost completely as we lead into 78.
So at 78 through to 82, it's time to strap in and get ready for the shivers down the spine moment that we all know and I guess love for this sort of music. So can you talk us through this powerful moment?
Absolutely. So from 78 to 82, we're going to have one more modulation. And again, it's a chromatic medium modulation. You're going to be sick of that one, but at least you're going to know that phrase by the end of it. It's going from a G here, going into B flat. So if we look at where we started in G, we went down to E flat, back up to G, and now we're raising up to B flat. It's going to be raised up. There's going to be a little bit more intensity there in a moment. But the way that he gets there is really stunning. That initial phrase, "Oh love that will not let me go," is taken and is slightly transformed each time. We expect it to end on that same note, "Oh love that will not let me go." We expect it to go there, but each time he raises it slightly. It raises it each time. We look at the euphonium starts it, followed by the solo cornet, followed by the baritones and the first trombone. They're each saying this idea over and over again. "Oh love that will not let me go. Oh love that will not let me go. Oh love that will not let me go." It's building, work its way up and up and up. We're starting at piano. By one bar later, it's mezzo piano, then mezzo forte. We're gradually working into a forte by the time we get to 82. We have allegando, poco a poco, slightly broader, poco a poco, little by little. So this one is a moment here, depending on the interpretation. This can be a bit large broadening of sound, or it can be quite a gradual one. But the importance here is that we raise ourselves into 82. So 82 is where we have our key change. It's where we have a reintroduction of the last verse of "Oh Love That Will Not Let Me Go," and it's led into it by a beautiful descending bass line. If you look at your bass trombone and the basses there, working our way down this line, which again is something which may have been borrowed from the end of Wagner, from the end of Elsa's Procession to the Cathedral, this excellent descending line, which leads us into 82. Almost all the ideas that we've been talking about so far have returned here. We have the heartbeat, which is now in the middle of the band. We have our first accents, which come from the lower end. They start to play the syncopated pedal point, encouraged there by the timpani as well. Pedals, for us music nerds, this idea of a note that keeps us grounded in one certain tonality, and it has this great motion because then the pedal keeps us grounded all here around this idea of a B flat, so that when it eventually changes, it feels like it's been building anticipation. We are so ready to move on to something different. The melody is in the powerful euphonium, the trombones, it's in the solo horn, and it's in the soprano cornet. Notice that for all of them, it's in a nice range. There's nothing too high or too difficult for us as far as range goes, but it has a lot of depth and power to it. But there's one part which isn't playing the heartbeat. It isn't playing "Oh Love That Will Not Let Me Go." It's playing the anguishing love theme. It's the solo cornet. The last verse for me, it ties in with the last verse of the hymn. "O cross that liftest up my head, I dare not ask to fly from thee. I lay in dust, life's glory dead. And from the ground there blossoms red a life that shall endless be." Knowing that the life that we are going through now, even in the beautiful moments, will one day be dust, will one day be gone, and we will have a more beautiful, sustained, incredible life beyond when we eventually are with our Heavenly Father. Even here in a moment of love and tension, even here in a moment of holy marriage, this moment here, that knowing that this is only the beginning. If this is the joy that we have here on earth, how much bigger, how much better is it going to be when we eventually get to be in heaven, is a huge decision to make, particularly here if that's our musical choice here. Notice that when we get to bar 85, there's a great moment of tension. Look at the solo cornet, which has been doubled just for a moment in the second cornet and the second horn. They play A flat, G flat, G flat. Look at the G flat compared to the F in the melody just below it. A G flat, otherwise known as an F sharp, against an F. That's as close as you can possibly get. That should sound terrible. That should be awful. But the tension there then leads to this beautiful release just a beat later. It's a last verse. It has all the trimmings that you'd expect. We're playing at forte. It only means strong. It doesn't mean loud. But everything here is building into our final moments when we get to 91. This absolutely has to be us imagining our fictitious bride is entering the room for the first time when she gets to 82. The beautiful thing when we look at this music is we can make our stories. We can put ourselves into it. So whether or not this is what actually happened or how we want to portray it to our audiences, to our band, to those who are listening, we get to introduce some of these storytelling, and I think it's a great thing. So 82, the bride has finally made it. She makes her way down the aisle, and we eventually get into 91. A final writ, a final moment of pulling back to lead us into there. It's anticipation. Is it going to happen? Is she going to make it down to the aisle? Yes, she is. She makes it here at 91. Fortissimo, not loud, strong, big, lovely sound here at 91. And look at the different ideas that we have. This is my covenant in fortissimo in all the horns and the baritones, which is then responded by 2 bars later by the cornets. This is my covenant. It's moving and moving, moving. This is something which I'm going to do. This is something I'm going to decide. Trombones. Yes, I love you. This lovely moment there. Again, that rising 5. Bom, 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 bom. Really, really exciting. It's moving down. The Wagner is absolutely there in spirit, if not directly copied. We then get into the final couple of bars. For me, it's very Kingdom Triumphant. That's which I think is a glorious way for us to imagine the end of a wedding celebration like this. The other beautiful thing is that, of course, if the bride hasn't quite made it, you can stretch out these bars a little bit extra if you need to. A final pause there, really, as the cymbal and as the timpani holds us over before this final glorious chord, this final acceptance of covenant. It's stunning music at the end. It's easy for this music to be something where, we just start quiet and eventually we get loud, and we just play through this one. There's so much more depth here. There's so much more beauty and detail to be found, and I think it's why this piece is such an impact on us today. Let's have a look at our covenant theme one more time. So our composer, Bill Hines, has written this beautiful music. And Bill, as we know, amazing established Salvation Army composer, someone who has written music and has changed the lives of so many in the Central Territory and further abroad than that. But have a look at this theme one more time. I think there's something else hidden in the covenant theme. We have this rising fourth, dum, dum, deem, deem. Then it becomes a fifth, yum, dum, deem, deem. Then it becomes a sixth, dum, dum, deem, deem. There's a little note in the middle there. But for me, whether consciously or unconsciously, what does that remind you of, Matthew? Does it remind you of anything? A rising 4, a rising 5, then a rising 6. Does that remind you of anything at all?
Climbing up stairs or a mountain, perhaps?
Absolutely.
Or waves on the ocean?
It does, but actually there's a song which I can think of which has that exact motif. Written by Bill Himes, perhaps his most famous song outside of brass band music, All That I Am. If you look at the music, All That I Am is a fourth, is a fifth, is a sixth, so whether consciously or subconsciously, this covenant all along has not just been the song of this is my covenant, this is my covenant. It's actually been all that I am is yours. All I can be is yours. All that I have is yours. Right now today, I have chosen to give all of this to you. Now, this is why this music is so special to me, because I've seen this music used in weddings. I've seen this music used at funerals. I've seen this music used with mass items. I've seen the staff bands love playing this one together because it has such beautiful gloriosity towards the end. But I've seen it used at commissionings. I've seen it used at soldiers' enrollments. This music is so impactful because of the message behind it. Whether or not you want to accept my silly bridegroom and bride theory, if you want to look into that story, that's fine. But if you take away from that, this is an acceptance of giving of what you are back to God. It is an acceptance of going on a journey of taking everything that you have and giving it back to the love that will not let you go. That no matter what else happens, that God is a love who is there for you and who will support you no matter what. He is the joy that seeks you through the pain. He is the light that follows you all your way. He is the cross that will lift up our head that we should not run away from. We know that for us as Salvation Army musicians, as composers, as bandsmen, bandswomen, as fans of the music, this music is special because it's not just notes on a page. There are deeper meanings behind the words, behind the associations, and I'm convinced and I'm committed to sharing the message that is behind this procession. Yes, it can be a bridegroom. Yes, it can be a wedding. But for us as Christians, this is so much more. This is a commitment to walking towards, to striving towards, reaching the closest that we can, the heart of God.
Well, Ed, thank you so much for your time there and all that work that's gone into that and unpacking that sacred message there behind the music and for helping us to explore that and perhaps to reflect on that in our own lives as well. Really do appreciate your time and hope to hear from you again soon.
Thanks, Matthew.